Good morning, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting of the Humboldt County Commission to order. This is our special meeting designated for canvassing the vote for 2021. It's 9 a.m. Would you please join me in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item of business is public comment. Public comment is not designed to address items that are not currently on this agenda, and they are any items that aren't found on this agenda will have to be agendized before we can discuss any of those items. So at any rate, do we have any public comment in the room? Do we have any public comment online? Not seeing any public comment. I'm sorry?
He said not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay, we're going to move on to item 4, is with the county clerk canvassing of returns for the November 8th, 2022 election. This is consideration, discussion, possible approval to accept the canvass of the November 8th, 2022 general election returns for all precincts and districts within Humboldt County as required by NRS 293.387. Tammy?
Okay. So you have, I've provided you with 3 items this morning: the election summary report, the statement of vote report, and then the final voting turnout report that we provide to the Secretary of State. These were also provided to anybody at the same time they were provided to you. They were provided to anybody who had put in a request, and they were placed on our website under the election section of the clerk's site for view by the public. The election summary report, which is the shorter of the ones that I gave you, this is the one we're actually canvassing to. This is the one the Secretary of State asked that be canvassed and be attached to the abstract that I will send to them if and when you guys certify this election. The statement of vote is one we have traditionally given to you over the years, just because you like the detail that's contained in that, which shows the precincts, the over and under voting for each precinct and race, and those sort of things. The turnout report is something that Jessica added yesterday afternoon because it just gives you some detail related to party turnout in the various methods of voting. And with that, I will open it to any questions from the commission.
Just for the record, could I get you to just state what the turnout was for each party?
Overall?
Yeah.
Let's see. Do I have a total? Know that I have a total. I think I'd have
We
to
only have it broken out by method of voting.
So I could read each one if you like. There isn't an absolute total. It's broke out by the type of voting.
Right.
So for instance, in-person early voting, the Democratic turnout was 184. Republican turnout was 1,278. Other, which is like your Reform, your Green, your Libertarian, your Independent American, was 64. Nonpartisan was 190. So we had 1,716 people participate in those various parties in the early voting process. The in-person election day voting, this would be what occurred on November 8th at the 4 locations that we have for voting in Humboldt County: the Vote Center at the Convention Center, as well as Paradise Valley's Community Hall or Vadis Community Hall, and the Fort McDermott Reservation Office. We had 143 Democratic voters, 1,104 Republican voters, 88 others, 231 nonpartisan, for a total of 1,566 on election day. Now, part of that election day or part of the early voting is the in-person same-day voter registrations. With that, with the Democratic, we had 10 new voters register same day, either in one of those 2 election frames. We had 4 that updated. The Republicans were 43 with 42 updates. Other was 3 with 4 updates. Nonpartisan was 5 with 13 updates, resulting in 61 new voters and 63 updated voters. For the mail ballots received and accepted, we had a Democratic turnout of 562, a Republican turnout of 1,557. Other is 177. Nonpartisan is 547 for a total of 2,843. On your second page of this, it's kind of broke out onto, the first is what's called signature cure. Those are ballots that were actually cured. So they are part of, part of them are the ones needing cure, and then those successfully cured. Part of those are mixed in with your mail-in. That's your mail-in vote. And then our UBCAVA and votes from the disabled community are also broke out there, not by party, but by type. We have 3 military individuals, 8 overseas citizens, and 2 voters with disabilities, for a total of 13 that use the EASE program, which is the online voting that is allowed for those identifiers. Did you have something?
So of the 2,843,
Is there a standard report that they give so that's similar to in each county, or do they do their own?
It's got their requirements, but they have to cover with.
I think somebody's not muted.
Best practices.
Could you please mute your phone?
What exactly?
those of you online right now, could you mute your phones?
I just muted him.
I'm sorry, what was the question, sir?
I'm wondering on the 2,843 votes, I'm just trying to determine what the total turnout was of registered voters in the county. I've had a number of questions asking whether or not we had more votes than we had registered voters.
Oh, goodness, no, not even close.
Well, that was the reason I wanted to state.
Yeah, and that's at the top of the election summary.
Right.
Our total registered voters was 9,847. We had 6,125 total turnout for a turnout of 62.2%. The portion of mail-in was 2,843 and the portion of our turnout was 28.87%. So the answer is correct that mail-in was the highest turnout of the portions within the turnout. But to be honest, I was a little disappointed with our turnout for a general election. I felt that it should have been much more closer to 80%.
Yeah.
We've done that in the past. I can't address why that didn't occur, but it was somewhat disappointing to me.
I just, thanks for stating that for the record. I know it was in here on the reports, but a lot of folks haven't seen this, and I
Right.
had the questions and I wanted to make sure we got that as part of the record.
Absolutely.
Any questions, commissioners?
You want to ask for questions from the audience?
I just
before
about
you-
to. Did you have a question, ma'am?
I do.
Come on up and state your name for the record, if you wouldn't mind.
Tim Christopherson. I personally did not have a problem, but I am here on behalf of others who have had problems. There's several places where there's discrepancies found. I know, I see that the turnout has not, been as high. People feel that they have been involved more than in the past, but I'm curious. So more mail-in ballots were received than people in person, right?
Yes, more mail-in if you add, actually more in-person voting happened if you add election day and early voting, but more mail-in as a single item. If you look at the front of your election summary report up here, I can use this one.
Mail-in was 28.87% of the total.
Right, but when you actually look at election day and early vote, you get about 33%. So if in voting type, mailing was the highest, but in person was still a bit higher when you add all the options.
Do you have the statistics of people who have complained or requested or had concerns that their ballot was not delivered to them?
I don't have statistics for that. We have had calls, obviously, throughout the process, and anytime someone didn't receive, we addressed it in the best manner available, whether it be canceling and mailing them a new ballot, offering them the option of appearing in person. If they were someone that qualified for the ease, allowing ease to be available.
In the primary, I understand there was a lot of ballots that was returned as undeliverable. Did any of that get corrected? Was it the same amount this time?
You know, I don't have the statistics for undeliverable. We do have a number. It's just a high turnover situation in Humboldt County. I will tell you, we have a very transient population, and I'm pretty much amazed at the number of people that actually move within Humboldt County. We also had a lot, as many of you may be aware, come back because people have canceled their PO boxes. And because ballots are not forwardable, that's a safety issue. They are not forwardable. Those ballots are returned as undeliverable, even though the person may still live at their home because their mail address was a PO box. Again, when people contacted us or reached out, we would cancel the ballot that had, if we had not gotten it back, or if it was already in as undeliverable, we went through the process with the voter to identify and resend, if they wanted to vote by mail.
Okay. Now, of those people who did not opt out, and so they received their ballots and they mailed their ballots, how many of them have you heard from that actually their ballot did not get counted?
We've heard from a couple within the last 2 days. It was based on signature cure or lateness, though, because again, the ballot must be postmarked by November 8th, election day, in order to be counted. The last day we would have received mail for that was on Saturday, the 12th. And we got about 6 ballots that were actually postmarked. I don't unfortunately have the numbers for how many we've received late. It's not a huge number at this point, maybe a half dozen or so that have
We've
been
received
received
11
late.
late ballots.
Thank you. 11 late ballots.
Okay, and so
And the one signature cure, we have heard from a couple of those because we've noticed them by mail. And then as we get closer and they haven't responded, we begin doing what we can to contact them by phone or email if we or parent, if it's a kid, or if we can figure out a way to get a hold of them, we reach out. But we do have uncured ballot signatures because again, the issue with mail-in ballots is their signatures must, well, first of all, they must sign, because a lot of those uncured is not signature match, it's that they failed to sign. The second is that if their signature does not match, that they are noticed and given the opportunity, it would have been by Monday, the 14th at 5 o'clock to cure those through, there's a couple of different methods. They could have done it text, through email, through answering questions. And so we did have some of those that have not been cured as of this point. That could be that someone just failed to get the notice, or it could have been that somebody else voted that ballot. And so that person isn't actually at the location where that ballot went.
There's not very many of those.
So those who had a discrepancy with their signature.
Correct.
A lot of them are not, since you acknowledge their ballot receipt whenever it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you discover that there's a discrepancy with the signature, you mail out.
We mail a notice,
You mail a
or if
notice
it's
to
closer, we
them.
start trying to call and email.
Which you wouldn't do that till after election day.
Usually it started on the 9th. It started on the 9th.
So from the 9th.
Until the 14th.
When you mail it, it goes to Reno.
Correct.
And
I
it sits there
understand.
during the holiday and the weekend, and then people don't get it until after the curing deadline.
Yeah. And that's, the ones on the 9th are only if they were received on election day. Those letters are going out from the period, they usually go out within 24 hours of the non-cure. So we began receiving ballots in somewhere around the middle of, they mailed out on the 17th in the largest group. So the following week is when we started getting ballots back, and we would have begun mailing notifications absolutely immediately. The person in charge of it was reviewing records. If she could send text messages, she would. If she could email, she would. And so they did everything they could to try and contact those voters that had no matches or failure to sign.
Okay, so back to that texting, email, phones. When we register, I don't recall putting all that information.
It's on your voter registration form. You can see it's not a required area. You don't have to, and a lot of people won't because they don't want the phone calls from the candidates and such. Emails are secure in Nevada. Those are private. We do not release those, but phone numbers obviously are on all voter lists. So it's the choice of the voter. That is not one of the required populated areas. You are correct.
Okay, and so I understand that there is a tracking service for people to.
It's called ballot tracks,
Mhm.
correct? Yes.
And so wouldn't, if you received a ballot, a mailed ballot or a drop-off ballot, and they're tracking it and it says accepted, but it does not say counted.
And let's make sure that one of the things I was going to address, and maybe I'll do it right now, maybe that'll address some of your issues. A lot of the people are going to the Secretary of State's website. And you can go in and you can go to your voter registration, and then the next tab over is your voter history. And most of those, if you voted by mail, will say ballot received. It does not say that it was counted. And that's because that does not happen. I confirmed this with the Secretary's office day before yesterday, that will not happen until 10 to 15 days after the election, when the county election official will certify vote history to the secretary, and then those ballots will be changed from ballot received to ballot counted. So if that is where they're looking, then
I understand that.
Okay.
When you look at the ballot tracks, it would say ballot accepted. Your ballot is being processed for counting. At what point do you update that?
and that ballot tracks, Mark, I know you're on. Would you mind addressing how ballot tracks works for us, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mark Voloshin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections. For the record, thank you for having me today, and certainly able to speak on the process for ballot tracks. Ballot tracks is a third-party system that has been used here in the state since 2020. It was used experimentally in 2020 as an opportunity to provide voters with additional information specific to where their ballot is in the pipeline. This is something that we've recognized over the years that voters have an interest in, and will continue to improve upon to make sure that going forward into future election cycles, the same service is used. The way it works in general terms is that it relies on the vote codes as they get fed from the county systems up to the state. And then when the codes are updated, then the ballot track system sends out a notification. Very similar to what was mentioned just a few minutes ago. It is reliant on how the voter signs up. If a voter signed up in 2020, and I will tell you, we had a number of folks sign up in 2020 who got a text message or a notification from ballot tracks, and it caught them off guard. There were others individuals who did sign up during the 2022 cycle, but ultimately, when an individual signs up, provides information, they have the ability to say, I want a text message, I want an email, I want a voicemail. And then when those codes are updated, reflecting certain wickets in the process, those notifications go out to the voter.
Okay, I might have missed that, but does that have to go through the Secretary of State? Who's the one that tallies that up? Who does the notification?
When it comes to ballot tracks in that process, it is a statewide service offered by the Secretary of State.
So again, it's not going to be documented until the county, the clerk has been accepted and it's been sent to the Secretary of State.
So the process with ballot tracks, just to clarify, very close to what you said, ma'am. Again, Mark Voloshin for the record, sorry. But there are 17 different counties with 17 different processes. In some counties, that is the case where it is only at the end. In Humboldt County specifically, though, I recall that it was there were a few other wickets where an individual would get a notification based on certain events like the ballot being sent. It also depends on where in the process an individual signed up. If ballots had already been sent and then you signed up, you may be only notified that your ballot has been received back at the clerk's office, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of nuance to it, and it's unfortunately hard to describe the overall generalities of the process given how many unique situations occurred.
Mark, this is Tammy. May I ask some clarification? So
Yes,
when
ma'am.
we enter into our voter management system, that is, a ballot is received and countable, does ballot tracks note to the voter that that ballot has been counted, or is it still just showing that we have received it in office?
I recall, Mark Lawson for the record, and thank you for the question. I recall that it says, I think the way we wordsmithed it was that the ballot was received for processing, I believe. Because there was, again, as you know, it's certain events that may still happen that may not be uniform based on, or even possible to identify based on the vote codes.
Okay, another clarification, please. If we enter a ballot into our voter management system with either a signature no match or a failure to sign, does ballot tracks identify that for a voter?
Thank you.
It has the ability to, and again, I would have to dig into some of the technical specifics to see. I simply can't recall, and I apologize, just given the kind of number of different ways it was done across the state in different counties. But it does have the ability. I believe we tried to have it set up to do that, to notify through ballot tracks about a signature cure as well. But I just simply can't recall at this time.
Thank you.
And was that most of your questions? Maybe you had, are you?
Oh, no, that just stirred up some more. So basically, if a person gets a ballot, they mail it in or they drop it off, they're tracking whatever. It says that it's been received. As he says, there is no, and like you asked, thank you for asking, because that's what I really wanted to know. People assume that, okay, their ballot is there, it's good. But if you found issues and you send them out, or maybe, the signature or whatever, that they assumed that it's okay. They're not going to know until after this day.
I would say that is probably right, given what Deputy Secretary of State Balshine said, because he wasn't really clear on whether or not it was notifying people if they were signed up for ballot tracks too. Let's be real key on that. Not everybody necessarily does that. I do know, although this is certainly not an overall answer, I know we have many people call and say, hey, is my ballot good? And we confirmed it was. I will also say we've had a number of people voice concern that their ballot wasn't counted based on, again, what I noted earlier, the voter history tab. While when I went in and checked each of those voters, their ballot was returned and counted. So I do say there's probably a flaw in the system related to that. But again, I'll also note for some of those people, they would have chosen to vote by mail, whether or not this was a mail-in state or not. And if we were 6 years ago, if their ballot wasn't received on the date of election, and if their signature didn't match, it just wouldn't have been counted. That was not something we did prior to these requirements with signature cure. If they didn't sign or something, we in our office would do our best to try and get a hold of people, especially on the lack of signature, but it wasn't a requirement.
Just if I could, for the record, the question's having to do with signature verification. Are we using that electronically now, as in Clark County with an algorithm, or are we using that a manual?
Everyone that does signature verification, that's everyone from myself on down to the people that you saw at the polls managing the kiosk, have to go through a training. That's required by statute. We all went through the training. The practice in the Humboldt County Clerk's office, I can't address any other counties, but in our office, is if whoever's checking in ballots gets a no match. Obviously, a no signature is very obvious, but a no match, it will go through a second and third check. If there is still a no match, now mind you, we're noticing at this point as well. If there is still a no match by the 14th in this case, which was the last day people could signature cure, all ballots that had not been cured as of 5 p.m. on the 14th went to the ballot board. Those are the people that count the ballots. There's a team of 6. They then view those signatures and they confirm or deny those signatures, saying they'll accept or not. They did accept one of the signatures we still had outstanding, and that ballot was counted. But that's the process currently in place. But we go through training. I'm sure that anybody that's been through that training will tell you it's quite a long training. And it's very interesting and it deals with points and slants and there's just all kinds of things. And I'm sure that Deputy Secretary of State Shane could indicate if someone could view that in some way through the Secretary of State's office, if they're curious in what the process is that we're trained in.
Okay, and all counties aren't the same with regard
The
to.
training is the same statewide, correct?
Right. Under the signature verification process, though, how do we have the baseline signature on same day registration?
Well, those people have to vote in person and show ID. They cannot vote by mail. Same day is only in person. We had only one location identified, which was either the early voting location at the courthouse or the vote center here at the convention center. When you appear for same day voter registration, you must have a Nevada driver's license, Nevada ID or tribal card, and proof of your physical address if it's something different than what is on your driver's license. Once those same days are cast, they are provisional. They are held separate. They do not go into the tally until the statewide comparison is done. Every county brings those same days in and they go against each other and they identify whether or not anyone voted in another location before being counted by the county that the same day was cast in.
With regard to the harvesting and the use of drop boxes, how are we utilizing that system with regard to those? If we don't know, if there's somebody that if there was and first off, I guess I need to ask, how was that utilized? Was our drop box out front of the building utilized?
Yes, very heavily it was. Yeah, I mean, I'd say we were probably equal between drop and walk-in, and mail. Obviously, a lot of people mailed, but the drop box was very popular. And of course, it's a secure drop box. It's only accessed by election workers, always in teams of 2. It is under constant surveillance. That's why that location was chosen, because our security system is right there, so it can be monitored constantly. That was the only secure drop box. We had boxes like at the polling site where if someone dropped off their ballot when they showed up, they could drop it off. And then there was a drop box at the Fort McDermott Reservation Office, and I think they had maybe 5 dropped off there.
Okay.
And then all those ballots also go through the same process of signature verification.
So with the regard to the people who are dropping those ballots off on the drop box, so the people that are harvesters, ballot harvesters.
I can't address if that occurred or not. I know that people walked in with ballots from other people, which is technically ballot harvesting. It has always been recognized that like a husband and wife, a wife might bring them in or something like that. The ballot harvesting law has allowed other people that are not directly part of the family to bring ballots in. I know that occurred. I can't tell you whether or not in Humboldt County we had harvesting. I would say that the types of ballots we saw coming in, that I would say no, but I can't actually say that because again, harvesters do not have to register or do anything. They just bring in ballots. And I don't think I want to count our wonderful post office who actually walked in on election night with a box of ballots that had been dropped in their various mail receptacles to make sure that we have them by election day.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. So how are the numbers here that is successfully cured are higher than the numbers that need to be cured?
Jessica, do you want to address how these totals are reached?
Sure. This is Jessica Kepke for the record. And we're referring to the outstanding cures or the successfully cured. So that all of that means is that the ballots that we had total that needed to be cured, we had more cured than were left uncured, if that makes sense. So more people were able to have their ballot counted by completing one of the available steps to verify that they did vote their ballot than people who did not do those required steps.
These are the ones just saying those are still left.
These are the ones, we had 40 that were not successfully cured by the end of the process and 76 that were. So we had whatever that, 116 total cures required.
I see. Okay. And I have another question about the ballot, the mail ballot. In 2020, our envelope,
Had a message on it that was incorrect and read something about white pine. Is that
yeah,
what you're referring to?
no,
Okay.
but yes, that was a big issue in 2020. But another one was, it had our name on the outside, it had our signature on the outside, and it had our party affiliation on the outside.
Okay.
I noticed this year's ballot has, the signature hidden.
Mhm.
It still has the name, which is,
That's how we check it in.
understandable, yes. But can you explain the code? Is there some sort of,
The code that you're looking at, I believe, is part of actually the preparer's way of tracking that the right ballot goes to the right thing. We don't use that code. If you mean the barcode, we don't use that.
and the numbers?
The numbers are what we use to key in to check in a ballot.
So there isn't anything encrypted in here saying Democrat, Republican?
No. And the reason the party wouldn't show on this one in any case is because these are nonpartisan races in the general. So there's no need to track Democrat, Republican. We do it in the system because obviously the parties want to know, but everybody can vote for everything in a general, so.
But I understand, I don't know if it was Washoe or Clark, right? They've had a lot of issues with the cameras going dark, and then magically they had record turnout voters. But somewhere I had seen that they're like, okay, now we're going to count the Democrat box.
And I can't address other counties. Ours come in, the way our team counts, well, so when ballots come in, we check them into the system. Then we sort them by precinct and by last name, because the reports are produced by precinct alphabetically, and that's how our ballot board actually makes sure that they have every ballot they should. So they'll come in, one team will come in and pull precinct 1. They'll go through their report and make sure they have, Ames, Bard, Cunningham, and all that, make sure they have all the ballots. Then they sort, because they don't look at ballots. So they put them through the opener, they open, they sort. The ballots then have no identifier on them for party, for anything except the vote. So then they feed it into the scanner that counts them, and they are batched by individual batches, because they have to be able to be. We have to have an audit later on the individual ballots and everything. So we sort them by 25s in our case, so that it's easy to go back and count up how many ballots we have. But there's no indication of party or voter on the ballot itself. The envelope, the only purpose is to get them into the right precinct and into the right.
So our precinct is somehow encoded.
Encoded in there. Yeah, when we put, it's not encoded. That number is unique to say you, and that goes to your voter registration. So when we check you into your voter registration, that identifies the precinct for us, so we can get them into the right precinct boxes.
Okay.
And we, like I said, party-wise, that's actually one of the challenges with a general election under our current systems, is because everybody does want turnout by parties. And we don't truly track it that way, because it's a general election. Everybody votes for everything. So it does take, Ms. Kepke could attest to the time it takes her to go through the different reports to determine those numbers by party.
Okay. Thank you.
Tammy, could I maybe get one of our folks that are standing by from the Secretary of State's office? I was wondering, and I want to state this for the record, I'll go back to the ballot harvesting question. That's kind of a burr in my saddle anyhow, because, it used to be a felony and now it's not. I had notification from 2 different people in this county that people who identified themselves as ballot harvesters were actually purchasing ballots on behalf of one party, and actually delivered those ballots as harvested ballots back to the county. I'd like to know what the statistics are with that. I think it's important that if we turn something legal that was illegal, we need to have a justification for that. And I'd like to
address something real quickly
Sure.
first before Deputy Secretary of State Walshine does. So let's say worst case scenario, let's say that did happen. Someone went to you and they said, well, give us your paper ballot, and then you chose to vote in person. Well, this is a two-part situation that's going to happen. The first thing is whichever vote comes in second is going to be discounted because we can't have two ballots. That's also assuming that that purchased ballot, if it's mailed in, meets the signature cure practice. Then if it is determined that, for instance, Commissioner French were to vote twice, that's going to be turned over to the Nevada Secretary of State's office, and it's going to go through a process. And I assure you, it's being taken seriously. I will say we have one situation in Humboldt County. It's a little bit different than your identifier that has been turned into them for investigation. And I fully expect that individual will not be pleased with how it goes forward. So it is very difficult for a person to vote twice.
Understandable. From a harvester's perspective, though, if they're collecting ballots which have not been cast by that person, whether the ballot showing up at apartment complexes, for instance, and people no longer live there and they're showing up in number, the signature is on that envelope.
No, it's not. There's no signature on what we mail out. You put the signature on when you mail it back.
The signature you're referring to that was on the inside of that
It's
was
a blank line
on the
where
blank.
you would sign when you return the ballot. There's no signature included. There's no identifying information other than the name and the mailing address of the voter on those envelopes.
So I'm wondering what the logic is behind that. Why are people out there actively purchasing ballots from that are active ballots that have not been cast and are harvesting those and placing them in drop boxes?
Sure, Deputy Secretary of State Walshine could address it, but I would say they want to throw shade on the process. But that would be my only thought.
The other way that it could happen is if someone didn't care whether they voted or not, but they're registered, and someone came to them and said, we'll give you $20 for your ballot, just sign it.
Correct,
Now
You've got
a valid ballot.
Yeah.
correct.
Yep. Okay. And that makes sense. If you're going to expend some money and you're going to spend the time and you're going to utilize a system that was illegal before, that would be the only reason that you possibly do that.
And I'm sure the Deputy Secretary has some comments.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what her
Thank you, Commissioner French. Mark Voloshin for the record. First of all, definitely interested in, just like Clerk's Bureau said, if there's been any indication at all, and we've been working very closely with Tammy and Jessica and the rest of the team across the state about any possible impropriety, any possible weirdness of individuals acting in a manner that doesn't line up with the provisions of Title 24, we aggressively investigate that. So I very much would like to follow up with you, Commissioner French, to see if I could find out some information. If the two individuals you talk to aren't willing to talk, perhaps I can get some details so we can get that to our investigators to see what's going on, because I wholeheartedly agree. If something isn't being done right, then we need to get to the bottom of it to do whatever we can to maintain the integrity of the election. And I think, as you have said, that we've heard of individuals offering to pick up ballots. This is something that was identified after the change from the legislative session when it no longer was a felony. Then a number of folks, frankly, across party lines have said, well, if it's now legal, then we're going to do it. We're going to try to help bring ballots for individuals who may otherwise not return them in a timely manner to try to increase the numbers of votes cast from their individual parties. In regards to paying for ballots, though, that's certainly something I had not heard before, but would very much like to investigate.
I guess the follow-up question on that then is without a system of registration of ballot harvesters, how could you possibly do that? Other than people individually complaining to county commissions or to recorders or clerk's office, county clerk's office, or to your office, that's on an individual basis. But how do you circle up on those people who are unregistered? And I only bring this up not to be argumentative, but I'd like to point this out as you know, I'm speaking for, as a representative in Humboldt County, and the questions, I'm representing questions that I've received. As you probably gathered, there is some real concern about the integrity of a vote. And I think it is incumbent on all of us to try to create a system or modify a system which allows for some confidence in that voting process. And we went the other direction in 2020, in my view. And I state this for the record because I think it's important that from the Secretary of State's office and back through the legislature, which authorized this, I believe it has created a cast a pall on the system. And there are those people who very much have serious concern with it.
Yes, Commissioner, Mark Velocity for the
Chairman.
record. Definitely, apologize, Tammy. Definitely agree with your comments about trying to make sure that the system is as secure as possible. And I will let you know that in working and talking with Tammy and the other clerks and registrars across our state, we are all committed to continuing to look at the regulations that are in place, trying to identify ways that we can make them tighter without reducing the difficulties for individuals across the state to be able to cast a ballot. And that absolutely is an ongoing project that will not stop with the change of administration or any other changes from the legislature in 23. We've got a lot of work to do. Frankly, it's an uphill climb to regain voter confidence in the process and the individuals involved in it.
Thank you.
And from my standpoint, Mr. Chairman, the issue that you're identifying, I never heard that in my office, nor do I believe any of my staff did. Other than one of the steps we would have taken, though, if something of that nature was presented to us, is we have the forms in our office. The secretary has them on their website, but you can file election integrity violation reports with the state. That's what triggers the investigations that he was referring to. We did have one come out of a conflict issue at the vote center that has been filed with them. So that is open to actually anybody that feels that there is something questionable about any part of election process, and it's been in place for years. This is not something new, that they can file those with the Secretary of State's office for further investigation.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Tammy, I have a problem with the mail coming in after the election's over. Is there any reason that you can think of that we couldn't have mail cut off at the same time we get cut off for a walk-in?
The fact that the statutes read otherwise.
Yes.
It's a legislative change that would have to be made to take it back to what you're referring to, what we saw prior to 2020, when if a ballot was not received in my office, in my case, by 7 p.m. on election day, it was not countable. We did that for many, many years. The change came through the legislature, and that would be what would have to occur, is a legislative change to take it back to that. Currently, what you're referring to, Mr. Commissioner, in case anybody is unsure, is we have up to 4 days following the election to accept a ballot that is postmarked on election day. And we have up to, I believe it's 7 days, it was the following Monday, or maybe it's 6, to accept any signature cures by 5 p.m. on that day. So yes, it extends it past, that extends the count. In our case, because we're a small enough county and there weren't that many ballots, we were able to finish the count on the 14th. I think our team cleared it at about 7 that night, processing everything that was outstanding and all signature cures that were accepted. But yes, it would need a legislative change unless this board were to direct me to be in direct violation of Nevada statute.
We don't want to do that.
No.
If they would make that change, it would certainly take a lot of the thought process of people that voting isn't fair.
Oh, yeah.
It looks terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely assures the fact that Nevada will be an outlier every time. You'll have just like we did this year, you'll have a count when every polls all close. And then 4 days later, we have a winner. And that creates like you say, it creates a huge amount of doubt in the system.
Well, and as I noted, in our case, on that Saturday, which was the last day we could receive ones postmarked by election day, we might have gotten maybe 6. And the majority of those were actually from students. Because I know who they came in. My guess is the ballots were mailed to their parents' homes and they mailed them on, and they came out of places like Idaho, North Carolina. And they're people that I'm aware of that are currently at universities. So that's where we saw that primarily come from. There might have been 1 or 2 that were actual local ballots that came from one of the rural areas like McDermott or something, but the majority were students. And their signatures, we did have a couple that were not matched on signatures and had to go through that cure process.
Okay. Any additional questions? Yes, sir.
Real quick. One thing, the mail out deal, you can't mail to Reno and get something back in less than 9 to 15 days. So you need to make a phone call the same day.
Well, if we have a phone number, we do.
Okay.
But not every, if you've been here at the beginning, it's what's on your voter registration, unless it's somebody I know. Obviously, if you had a no match because of our community and because of who I am, I'm going to know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
But we do have voters, and you can look at our voter lists. It's not like it was back in the day where you know everybody. So there's a lot of people we don't know. We did have one woman very upset about the fact that her ballot, because she got the notice, like you said, she got it on, she didn't pick up her mail until the 14th in the evening, and it was after 5. We had no phone number for her. We had no email address for her. It was not somebody that I knew. We didn't have her in our jury system because we were checking everything we could to find contact information. And you're right, mail out of this area, and particularly out of our rural post offices, also those in Paradise and Orvada. But rurals, like if you mail from Orvada, you're even going to add another day or 2 on there. So we realized that's one of the reasons I put in the instructions and in the sample ballot that if you were going to mail back a ballot and you were going to do it on election day, walk in and have it postmarked. Because we did, like I said, I can't give you the total number of late ballots we've received so far, but it's probably around 10 or 12, maybe. And that was because they probably dropped them in the mail on election day in like a drop box outside or something. Because our post office, like I said, I think his name's Josh. He walked into my office at 6 o'clock. They had went through every bin they had at 5 and picked up any ballots they could identify, and they brought them in. But anything that was dropped at 6:30 would have not been counted because it would have been postmarked the 9th. Or depending on if they mailed it out of a rural, it would have went to Reno probably before it was postmarked.
Do you get mail that's postmarked the 8th, 4 days later?
On the last day, as I just said, we had maybe 6, and most of them were from like students that are in other states, and they were coming back, but they waited till the last minute to mail them.
Because they run around with hand cancelers, and that's the reason you should not be able to receive a ballot after the 8th, period.
I agree. I mean, I
Because
don't
that opens
disagree
itself
with that.
up to corruption. And this country's worth fighting for, and people are getting ready to go fight for it, I'll guarantee you.
But currently statute
fact.
does set forth that process. So it's a legislative change. It's important. All of us, anybody that disagrees with that, reach out to our legislatures, talk to them. If you also recall, it was very difficult with the 2021 legislature for us to reach out. They did most of it in closed session because of COVID. So I don't know how much they were really listening to the clerks and registrars that had concerns.
That
2020 was a standalone.
In
I got a
2020.
little bit of bad taste in my mouth. Yeah, and I said, it's gonna happen this year because nobody did a damn thing to change election laws, period.
Yeah.
It allowed
23
to
is the year.
facilitate, and
23 is the year they're going to have to do this. And we shouldn't have been surprised because there wasn't an opportunity for them change unless they called a special session like they did the first time. If it smelled bad from the beginning, and I'll just say it, to watch the optics of what happened there, 2 special sessions back to back, and for what reason, changing election law.
COVID facilitated all this.
It did. It was a good
It's
excuse.
exacerbated. It should never have been allowed as a formula for it. But it just seized on the opportunity and ran with it, and they ran really hard with it.
Well, I don't think anybody would disagree with you, Tebow. But I think from a standpoint of the folks that are up here right now and the legislature, especially, and the governor that we have, that we're about to see, I think it's important that we revisit this thing and we do it vigorously in the 2023 election, because like you said, the optics are terrible regardless of how it comes out. And having said that, one thing I wrote a note on, you're talking about signature verification, and you've got that little electronic pin that you're signing that on in there. And you and I both know that has nothing to do with what
You'd probably be surprised at how well it does do. I think that where that electronic aspect becomes more of a problem is with the automatic voter registration at DMV. A lot of people don't like signing that way, so they'll do something weird.
Yep.
And then that's the signature that comes into their voter record. But the majority of us, and this just comes not only from this training I went through, but from 30 years in this position, in this office, and being a notary for longer than that, most of our signatures have specific points to them that are very clear, whether it be the slant or the way you do a J or an F, that are very, very clear. And in short of, I will say that when you sign at 18, you might need to update your signature when you start to get to that point where you've signed so many darn things that you're tired. But for most of us, our signatures have fairly good match points that are very distinct to our signatures.
They laughed at me when I signed it. I signed that thing and she looked at me and she knew me, obviously, but she said, really, you can do better than that. So, but I just was going to say, it's hard
going forward. And is with the youth, we have youth that don't have signatures, so they print. So that is going to be, you're correct. There are going to be issues going forward. I actually had one I notarized before yesterday that I said, well, I need your signature. And he's like, I don't know what that means.
Is there a possibility?
No, I don't.
Is there a possibility you can take this up with NACO? You 17 counties to work with
that's a great question.
legitimacy to me, because all the years I sat there as the chairman of the legislative committee for 8 years, those are things I think NACO could address.
Yeah.
Work hand in glove with the Secretary of State. And then this governor has something he can put in his teeth and run with, because we've got a Democratic majority, I believe, of the Senate. They were only one short last year, total maybe two short. And
we have right now, NACO's meeting as we're speaking right now. So obviously I'm not sitting in both rooms at the same time. And this would be the meeting that the 17 counties would actually make some noise. But I will bring it up in the next meeting, and I'll bring it up. In fact, our executive director for NACO is going to be at our meeting on Monday. So that might be something we'll bring to his attention.
I'll be on the legislative committee
Yeah.
meeting this afternoon, so I'll bring that up.
because that's something that 17 counties, because even though Clark County was more than everybody else, Philly, Don Durham, you get 2 representatives from each county and everybody's equal footing,
Clark County had-
Eureka and Esmeralda, and if you go for it, you got a lot of, 17 counties, not, Washoe's doing their thing or Clark County is doing their thing. It makes a hell of a difference.
Interestingly enough, though, Tebow, both Washoe and Clark County had hiccups with the 2020 count. So the representatives sitting on NACO, they both of those counties, in fact, all 17 counties expressed some concern that way. But, we got the bill draft requests that we could actually pull forward and actually draft something from NACO's perspective to doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere in the legislature, but it certainly it would hit the media. The media would certainly, it put this out on the forefront. So anyhow, I'll
Okay,
I'll-
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One last comment on
This is Della
on this.
Height. Hello?
Go ahead, Della. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is Ella Height. I've got a question. While we've got a chance, why don't we do something really simple that will eliminate all this fraud crap? If we would go straight to paper ballots in person on the day, other than those who have mailed in to get absentee ballots if they're out of state for schooling or medical reasons, or if they're in the service, or if they're homebound people that can't get in, where they have requested a mail-in ballot. That way you get rid of all this going around, all this having to verify this and verify that and verify. You got it right in front of you. Florida did it, and they've got way more population than we do, and they had their whole thing counted by 9 o'clock at night.
Again, a legislative
thought.
change.
Yep, that would be a legislative change. I agree. And I think that's just basically what you're asking for is a reset, pushing a reset button back to the way it looked in 2000.
Actually, yes,
Yes.
2000, you're
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
2000, because we've had open absentee requesting for a number of years, but 2000, it was only for cost.
It changed then.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But no, in 2000, everything went to a mail-in ballot before election time.
Yes.
It was paper ballot. It was a paper ballot. It was a punch card, Ella, in our case.
Yeah.
But I
But it
mean,
did
get
change
rid
in
of the
2000.
machines, get rid of the machines, get rid of all this crap. Everything go to paper ballots, hand counted, just like they did in Florida, and they got a far larger population than we do. And theirs was done and in by 9 o'clock at night, their time, of course. So, I mean, if they can do it, I'm pretty sure they're no more smarter than we are. I think that we should do something, since you people are the people who have the power to make suggestions and make requests to get this done, that maybe you guys could say, hey, enough's enough. We are not going to live as prisoners anymore. Whatever you come up with next, we're free Americans, and we want to vote intelligently. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
How long are these voting machine contracts good for? 2 years, 5 years?
Well,
a big question.
we're in contract with Dominion now. Dominion is one of only 2 current electronic voting machine systems that are approved by the state, that have
They're all
went through the
connected to the
certification.
internet? Or
No,
is
there
it
is no
Wi-Fi or whatever?
No, there is no internet connection on the voting machines. We do have a connection on the BMAX, the kiosk. That's how we match your signature, but the machines themselves are not internet connected at all. That being said, there are only so many systems approved in the state of Nevada, and that lies with the Secretary of State's office to actually identify those. So there's Dominion and ES&S currently. That may change going into 2024. I don't know what all's being looked at.
There's a lot of suspicious nature. I'm not techie buff, so I just, me know nothing. I can't hardly turn my damn phone on. I answered and then I put it on. I think, you'd like me to call, please hang up. Put out, how do I shut it off?
But actually, we had paper ballots this time and they're still suspicious. So I mean, there are programs and systems that are paper ballot based, removing the electronic voting methods and going purely to paper ballots, Optiscan type ballots.
This is a question that it came up in 2020 when the question on having to do with electronic machines. Does the Secretary of State's office do a debriefing on an annual basis to determine whether or not the contractors performed as expected and identified those issues that, that obviously there were issues some years, and I would think that, we would have a debriefing, the ability to have a debriefing and then take recommendations from that.
And I think Deputy Secretary of State, Voloshin, would have to answer that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Mark Voloshin, for the record. It's an excellent point, and certainly something that since 2020, we've been taking a much closer look at. Contracts across the state, everything from the effectiveness of mail ballot providers to really every possible contract is certainly something that we're not above reviewing, discussing again internally across the state, looking for trends, room for improvement, and those sorts of things. So that is definitely an ongoing process. But as of right now, I do not have a report that I could provide to you detailing the strengths, weaknesses, pros and cons, that sort of thing of the numerous contracts that we have relating to elections administration across the state.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be a great exercise to prepare for, because I have a feeling that during the legislative session coming up is that we're going to have a very detailed conversation about what worked and what didn't. and about the optics of the election system, which in perception's reality with a lot of people. And I think we need to recognize the fact that the perception is that the system has got some significant issues. And I think if we take that approach to it into this legislative session and we look at it from a standpoint of trying to shore up our election process in terms of confidence and whatnot, I think we probably go a long way. So anyway, I'm done.
Question, how many voting irregulars have been reported this year after this election?
The only,
I'm
it
talking
wasn't an
statewide.
irregularity. The only integrity report we received was a confrontational situation at a vote center in Humboldt. We did have some issues. We had issues in Paradise Valley, not with the voting machines, but with the kiosk, the intakes. We couldn't get connection between the tablets and the kiosk to actually check people in. We had to go to a more manual method there, and it took a while to get that addressed. We had one machine, we had a couple of machines that had power issues at the vote center. Again, we're talking about the age here. And that was addressed by bringing in new power cords, which I'm going to get to because our IT team really picked up and did some help with us on some of this. So mostly it was just like I said, connectivity in Paradise and some electrical issues.
That's not statewide.
That I can't answer. I don't know what that would have to come through the deputy. And I don't believe all those reports will be part of what we're doing currently with the certifications and things. They'll get reports from across the state on machine malfunctions, any kind of integrity reports, and that'll come in through some reporting that we'll do over this week and next week. So I don't know that he could generally address that now, but I know that he's very receptive, TPO. So if you needed contact information for the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, I'll be happy to provide that to you. And I'm sure he'll discuss it with you.
Well, the last election, there was 2,000 some irregularities and complaints, and they investigated two, and they didn't follow those up. They didn't have enough officers investigated. Now, that's not acceptable to the public.
And
So
I
one
can address
clarification,
that.
we did investigate all of them. We investigate literally everyone. And I will tell you, just like Tammy said, she was spot on. The reports are still continuing to come in. We will continue to receive them. We received, I will tell you, hundreds of election integrity violation reports since the start of the primary. And we continue on a daily basis to receive them, investigate them, refer many of them for criminal investigation through our law enforcement agencies at both the federal and state level. That process, those investigations will absolutely continue. I mean, we're still looking at and conducting investigations relating to 2020. So there's no, the statute of limitations typically for election related crimes is 3 years. We take that very seriously. We work very aggressively to investigate those because at the end of the day, I want my vote to count just like you do. I do not want someone to cheat. And by golly, if I pretend and I think to myself very routinely, if you were my boss, what would you demand of me? You would demand round the clock attention. You would demand that I be relentless in identifying and looking into these sorts of allegations to figure out which ones are faulty and which ones are true. And if there's a nugget of truth, then we're going to go after that and investigate it to the fullest extent of the law. So yes, sir, the team and I are still working very hard, and we will work very closely with your clerk in Humboldt to make sure that if there's anything Humboldt specific, that we identify it and get it investigated as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact, and I don't doubt that the Secretary of State's office does the best it can with the resources it has. We all know what those resources are, though, and it's it can be pretty daunting when you get a year like when you get the kind of election integrity complaints that are coming in. The other side of it, I think, though, is that in many cases, if it takes a long time for those investigations to occur, the damage has already occurred. We've already established what the election was. We've already seated those people in whatever positions that they ran for, and so obviously the potential for the harm being realized prior to the investigations being completed is real. The other side of it is that perception thing again. And if we have a real problem with election integrity when you have large groups of people that we've never seen complain about an election in the past, showing up at meetings now or calling commissioners or calling county clerks and whatnot and wondering what's going on with elections. I think that is creating a perception that needs to be addressed. And I think from a standpoint of you know, the testimony and the time you spend in the legislature having to do with election, any changes proposed to an election system needs to center around that perception as much as anything. But, you know, the conversation that we saw coming from the Secretary of State following the 2020 election, indicating that she had completed the investigations that had been completed to that point, in their opinion, would not have changed the outcome of an election. And that's kind of bittersweet, to be honest with you, that, you know, yep, we acknowledge the fact we had a pretty large number of issues with regard to election integrity, but it is in our opinion that they would have got elected anyhow. Any rate, I state that for the record, and I think it's something that we're going to be revisiting here in 23 for sure. Any other additional questions?
I have one more comment.
One more comment. Go ahead.
I wonder how across the state the voter turnout was, because of what we saw here wasn't near what we thought it was. And I wonder if this ballot harvesting and the thought of a lot of people that the elections aren't really fair anymore, that people have just decided not worth.
And that I can't address. I will say that I do believe one of the issues that does, from our standpoint, when you look at a traditional turnout, 80% and higher in Humboldt County, one of the things, and we discussed this, I believe we discussed it probably at the last couple of canvasses, is we do now have automatic voter registration through the Department of Motor Vehicles. So that ups our numbers, but there is certainly a strong number of those people that probably will never choose to vote. They do it as part of the process and they never respond, which is also a concern when you consider the mail-in ballot situation. So while our numbers are high, close to 10,000 right now, whether or not that's truly a great depiction of the actual active people that are interested in actually voting, I don't know that that's accurate. But I'm sure that the deputy secretary can say what the turnout was. I didn't gather those numbers, but he could probably indicate what the turnout was statewide for this election. He's looking.
Sorry about that, Tammy. Just stepped away. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you tell Commissioner Tipton was inquiring about the turnout statewide? Do you have those numbers by chance?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Again, Mark Voloshin for the record, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections. The turnout this year that we have tracked currently across the state was a little over 1 million, 1,023,616 for 55% turnout across the state. Of that turnout, a little over 50%, 51% voted by mail, a little over 27%, so 27.75% voted during early voting, and then election day turnout a little bit higher this year in both the primary and the general at 21%. You may remember back during the 2020 election cycle, it was closer to 10 to 11% on election day itself. But during the 22 general, the turnout was 21%.
How many eligible voters does the state have?
Active registered voters, sir, a little over 1.8 million, 1.86. And that number is constantly changing as individuals are removed because of again, either moving out of the state or passing away, or as new individuals register to vote.
55%. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Christopherson. I would just like to bring it to the attention, I don't know if this is the right time, but with the changes in the DMV, there has been a number of people who had their voter registration status switched. And the DMV is denying it. So I have a question for you, Mark. What are the number of registered voters that had their voting status, their voting party changed through the DMV? Particularly before the primary.
Yes, ma'am. Mark Velocity for the record, and I appreciate you calling that out. So the total number of individuals across our state that were impacted by that change was 44,414. I just happen to have that number handy. I was looking at it earlier today, actually, for a number of reasons. And one, just to clarify, the DMV is not able to change. And I think that's probably what they were referring to. The DMV is really a receptacle of that information that they provide to the county election officials across our state. So what had happened was, because of the nature of our system, right, where if you're registered to vote in Humboldt, but then you move to Carson City, your registration in Humboldt is canceled, and a brand new one, unconnected to the previous one, is created when you move to Carson City and register to vote. The way the process was set up was one that if you were in Humboldt and you updated your voter registration through one of these automatic processes, like renewing your driver's license, and you left the party affiliation blank, there was basically an option where it changed the party affiliation to other because we didn't know what party affiliation was. The correction was made, and this was well before the primary. In fact, we modified this, I believe it was in October, September time period of 21, such that if you were already registered and you left it blank, you just remained the party affiliation that you previously were. When you still move, though, between counties, we don't have that party affiliation, and then it does still, in fact, put that individual as an other. But of course, there's a postcard notification that goes out. Those individuals see that, go, wait a minute, I'm not other, I'm supposed to be this party. And then they typically contact the election official or go online, and it takes about 15 seconds, and you can update it and change it pretty quickly. But of those 44,414 that were totally affected, by the time we had corrected it, over 1,100 had already done so. And in fact, there were about 1,200 that had already canceled their registrations or inactivated for a number of reasons. We also, across the state, sent out notifications too to make sure those individuals were aware prior to the primary. But that issue has been corrected now for, frankly, over a year.
Okay, so was there a glitch in the system that a voter who did not mark the bots or anything like that, they were going to keep they did not move, they did not go to another county. They had an issue just because they happened to be present there. So was there some sort of glitch that has been fixed?
It wasn't, Mark Velocity for the record, it wasn't necessarily a glitch. As you can imagine, a statewide complex IT system like the automatic voter registration agency process is. It was really a coding, a procedural rule, so to speak. That rule of if they leave it blank, make them, change their or send the information to the county stating that their party affiliation should be other. What we did was you just changed that rule to if they leave party affiliation blank, first check to see if they have a party, and if they do, leave the party as is. The registrant left it blank. Therefore, whatever the party affiliation was, just leave that alone. So it was a minor change, one of a great number of rules that we had in place and we've been working on for years as part of the implementation for AVR, but one that absolutely, again, when we identified this concern from both voters and election officials, we immediately worked to figure out how to correct it and make it better as we do with all of our processes.
Thank you. Tammy, I have a question.
I have a question.
Hang on a second.
Thank you.
So how many postcards has Humboldt County sent out because of the DMV switch?
I don't have that number in front of me. Do you remember, Jessica? I know we did a lot. We didn't have a ton for us, but we noticed all of them. I don't know if she's there or
I have
she's
that,
frozen.
actually, Tammy, I have that number here. Mark Velocity for the
Yeah.
record. There were only 87 individuals in Humboldt that had to be notified.
And we sent out, as you noticed, the postcards, and then we, a standard practice for Humboldt is when we mail things out, we also give them return envelopes so that they can easily mail back their responses.
Okay. I still have more questions. Did you want to?
Sure. Ellen, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know why that the DMV finds it necessary, even because I write on mine, I've already registered. So the DMV has no business registering somebody to vote just because they get an ID or a driver's license. That is not their place is to get people so they can legally show ID or legally, if a person wants to vote, they could request, they can go in and register. I want to know why we've got the DMV doing what they shouldn't be doing.
I believe it's federal.
Legislature.
We voted
Well,
on
it's-
it last election.
Yeah, well, and it was also, I believe it's part of the Deputy Secretary of State, LaShawn, can you confirm, is that part of the Help America Vote Act or part of the Motor Voter Act?
Yes, ma'am. Mark Velocity for the record. So it was voted on. It was on the ballot back in 18, I believe, for the second time. So again, the electorate of Nevada chose this process for automatic voter registration. And really, it's again, not that the DMV is necessarily registering people, right? It's just that the DMV, because they have that ID process where you have to provide information about residency and identification to get a driver's license. It's a single repository, a centralized data bank of confirmed Nevada residents, both by identification and residency, to help facilitate it. But yes, ma'am, it was on the ballot.
Centralized so as it gets shipped over to China to be kept on hard drives, right? Just a question.
Not sure. I have not heard that.
Well,
as a
I
note,
can tell
the-
you, there's a lot of verification of the fact it has been. Especially the people who work the voters in the voters, where they're doing the election, when they work the elections, all those people's ID have been managed to just happen to get over onto a drive over in China and stored.
Okay, you have another?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so back to the machines. Did you happen to answer? I wasn't sure if he kind of asked the question, but how long is our Dominion machines on contract?
I believe we are through 2024 right now, but obviously, it's not something we wanted to review until we knew what was going to happen at the state level. There are other options, whether it be with Dominion or ES&S for paper ballot processing. It obviously will have a cost associated with it, so it's something that we'll discuss during budget hearings and stuff as well.
Because are those Dominion machines, are they like leased? I mean, you don't.
No, they're
own
bought.
them.
We own
You
those.
own them.
We own those, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we own the system is owned by Humboldt County.
Okay, and I understand that there was several voters who voted in person on election day with all the machines, and they checked their phone for internet connection, and there was pages.
Well,
So-
there's internet connection within the building, but those machines do not have the necessary installation to allow for a wireless connection.
So you cannot access them from the courthouse and
No.
say, oh, this machine has, it's malfunctioning, let's fix it.
No, the reports
remotely?
come from the team leaders, and we have to go physically to the sites. That's why if you had been there on election day, we report numbers. So each of the team leaders goes to each individual machine, and at the lower number, it tells the number of people that have voted. That's a manual process. We can access the kiosks. Those are the voter management systems. Those are the ones that are sitting at the front where you sign in.
Right.
Those have a connectivity. There's a secure connectivity that our IT, you can speak to Mr. Grantham on this because he worked very hard to have the secure connection that we hold for merely that process. The ICXs, which are the ones you vote on, have no connectivity. Only the kiosks have a connectivity.
Oh.
And that's to report the numbers. And that's how they connect to our system to extract your signature. That's where your signature is.
Yeah, okay, so it's just the ones when you
In the
check in
front,
that are
in the
that are
front,
in.
or during early voting that are at the table.
Okay, so would that vary from county to county?
No, it should be the same. Well, no, they don't all have the same equipment. So, but no, there should be no internet connectivity at all for the voting machines themselves. When we talk about whether it be the ICXs or the ES, I don't know what ES&S is called, the kiosks. And you don't necessarily always have connectivity. For instance, I'm sure like Mineral County may not, or Esmeralda may not have the ability to have connectivity. So they may load to their kiosk and it's not live. We are live because we have that secure connection that our IT department has created.
Okay, and I don't know, I had seen different workers, something online, they videoed their voting machine and the numbers were changing.
Well, the numbers will change only as people vote. You have your base.
Yeah, but that wasn't the case.
And in here in Humboldt
No,
County,
no, it wasn't, but that's why I was just like, could it vary from county to county then whether? they
that's a
have an
possibility.
internet
I can't
connectivity?
answer that as far
You could.
as the equipment. I don't know if Deputy Secretary of State can, but the understanding I have and that we've tested is that the ICXs have nothing, whatever it is. And again, like Tebow says, tech stuff, whatever it is installed on tablets or phones that allows that connectivity is not in there.
Can you ask him?
Are you still there, Mr. Deputy Secretary?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
answer the question for Ms. Christopherson?
I apologize. Would you mind stating it again one last time?
What she's asking is if I have assured her that the Dominion ICX machines that we use for voting are not connected to the internet and do not have the ability to connect. And she's asking if that is true across the state with all equipment in other counties.
Oh, absolutely. And I think just like you said, it's important to identify, you mentioned that there was Wi-Fi throughout the buildings. That is a theme that has come up across the state. There's confusion about Wi-Fi existing and what parts of the voting systems do connect and which parts do not connect to the internet. None of our voting systems that you stand in front of to cast a ballot anywhere in the state of Nevada have the ability, even the ability to connect to the internet, period. Other parts in certain counties have it so that the poll books in some locations do connect to the internet, right? So that in Washoe and Clark and certain other counties, right, if you have an electronic poll book, you want that to be connected to the internet so that in real time, if somebody votes at one polling location, that individual, if they tried to run down the street to another one or drive across the county to a different polling location, it would have already updated and caught the fact that they've cast one ballot and it blocks them. So like it's a good reason to have that. And those poll books are not connected to the internet either, which is again, in Humboldt specifically, right? Why they hand you, a card and there's a gap in the process where you don't just check in on the machine. That's done at a separate kiosk from the voting system itself. But yes, that security, that gap between internet and voting, apparatuses and machines, absolutely is a mandatory part across the state.
Thank you. Just one last thing. So I just have a little concern about certifying the election as counted right now. There are so many people out there that assume that their ballot went through. Maybe they got lost. Maybe they never got mailed just because of all the different, it's got to be mailed from the post office. Then it's got to go to Reno. Then it's got to come back. And then the voters got to get it and then they sign it and then they mail it and it goes back to Reno and then it has to come back and it's got to be counted by a certain amount of time. And there's so many people that are upset with, because everything changes, right? 2020, it was different. The primary was a little different than it is now. And I just think that there's a lot of people. I don't think harvesting this year was the problem as much as their ballots actually being counted. Just my thought. But
And in response to that, and I understand Ms. Christopherson's concerns. First of all, even if we got a ballot today or determined someone's signature really was accurate, we're past the point that that ballot can never be accepted. Secondly, by statute, today is the last day you can certify because the Nevada Supreme Court is required to certify on the 22nd. So it does go through another process. This is not the final. I would be happy if you like, I don't know that I can have it ready for you on Monday, but if you'd like a report, say at your December 12th meeting, we can give you a report of everything from undeliverables to the number of undeliverables we received, to any ballots we continue to receive or comments we continue to receive, so that you have a full understanding of what maybe we see in this week and the next week, as opposed to the paper ballots coming in or coming back as returned or being received late. We can provide that, absolutely.
Okay. You have an interest in that, commissioners?
I'll be happy to provide it. We'll have it if you do. And then that way, if the public has an interest in it, it'll just be a generic one that'll say how many undeliverables, how many lates.
I think the more information, the better.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be happy to provide that.
Great. Okay. Any additional commissioners or I'm looking for a motion.
Ron and Jesse still on?
Jesse, oh yeah.
Is Ron on right now?
I am.
Yeah, this is Jesse. I'm here.
Okay, we're at the point now where I'm looking for a motion for the approval and accept the canvass of the November 8th, 2022 general election.
I would make a motion that we accept the canvass for the 2022 general elections, final in Humboldt County.
Motion
as
on
presented.
the motion on the floor. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion's carried.
Thank you. Just as a note, I would like to extend some thanks in a public venue because it kind of plays on something from the 90s, but it takes a village to put on an election. It really does. So I first really want to thank the poll workers, the election workers that stepped up this time. It's amazing how many new ones we had come in that once they found out what was involved, they were like, wow. But we had them step in across the state, including folks that came in to help manage a requirement at the Fort McDermott Reservation with a new polling site there. I would very much like to thank the Humboldt County family in general, everything from the top. You commissioners, thank you for sacrificing your room for this long time. I know that that is not the easiest thing, but it does make the voting process so much easier when we have the larger space instead of my office and the ability to separate the voters. We had people from every department pretty much volunteer to assist us, whether it be during early voting or hauling, custodial and building and grounds. Wow, awesome. IT helped with everything. Our county manager's office helped with everything. So I really want to thank the Humboldt County employees for all that they did for us. Jessica even gave us, from the library, gave us her McDermott librarian to help manage that site at the reservation. And then I also want to thank my staff. They gave 110%, gentlemen. Those ladies are hard workers and they basically bled for this election in some situations.
Absolutely.
And then the people of Humboldt County, overwhelmingly, they were supportive and kind and understanding and patient because there were lines. We recognize that that occurred and we're working to see some other options, how we can line up that voting site to make better use of the space. And that's kind of it. So thank you so much. And I thank you for your support as well.
Yeah, happy.
Thank you. I know that you spent a little time at it.
little bit.
Many of the things that you just described and are strengths that our community, all of us would agree with, and all the way to the membership of the community itself. And I think that's in large part one of the reasons why we live here. Is that we've got a
Absolutely.
wonderful community we live in.
Winnemucca is, I've been in other places,
too.
but this is home and there's a reason.
Yeah, me too. Okay, I'm going to item 5, which is additional public comment. We have any additional public comment in the room? We have any additional public comment online? Not seeing any additional public comment.
Dave's got one right.
Oh, you got one out here.
I'm late, the guy are late. I don't like to catch up on the damn papers, because most of them are accurate. What's the status on the COVID this year? Are we gonna have face off on masks and stuff and all this again, or? The hospital, I went over there now, they're getting money to make people wear their damn masks. I said, what's the deal? And they said, well, the government, if you participate, you get money. Well, that's the wrong way to serve the public. When I go in, I don't like a mask. They bother me to wear them. If I would give my medical attention, I've got to wear a mask. I mean, now I don't know what the county's position will be this year. You go enforce masks or facilitate the hospital, or the hospital needs to get off dead center and quit supporting our damn government. The government will provide for you anytime nobody wants to. If they give you money, people take money. So they need to kind of get their act together. That's this for the hospital board, not you people, but
Sure.
I wonder what the county position is going to be at large on this.
My understanding is right now, there's no proposal on the table even remotely that we're going to even entertain anything like that.
Good.
No, there isn't. The hospital is changing their masking requirements. It'll be on their next meeting.
To get rid of it?
To get rid of it in most cases, there's some areas that will still have it, obviously in surgery.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for the public to walk in. That's
It'll be optional, is my understanding.
Yeah, there'll still be a check when you check in, and if you fail to check in, you're gonna be asked to wear a mask. If you don't fail to check in, then you won't. The way I understand it, I haven't seen all of it, but
Tammy, when they get an X-ray, she said, well, the board took taking money from the government to participate in that mask requirement. And that's the wrong way to treat the public. It ought to be optional for the public. I mean, if you're a health provider, I can see.
I'm not aware of that at all.
Well, that's what was stated.
Yeah, most of the ARPA funds have already come through that are going to show
but
up.
it's on the next meeting.
Okay, because I was surprised. I was about ready to turn around and cancel my doctor's appointment, thinking it'll wait 3 months to get another.
Yeah, I get you.
People don't like to be dictated to. Young people used to get in line like a sheeple.
Yeah, you're not looking at very many of them here.
No, I.
So, all right, thank you. Any additional public comment? Not seeing any additional public comment. This meeting's adjourned.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
I can turn it off, yeah.
Thanks again, Tammy.
You're welcome. Okay.
See you Monday.
Here again.
Yeah, sorry. This could be kind of this could be a tight meeting.
That's right, because